All right. So our warm-up question will be our wrap-up question instead, but I want to give you a preview of it because we're going to talk about it later. So parables are stories, and we've been studying them for a while, and they make us feel things, right? We've had probably the full range of human emotion while we've sat here. So what we feel, what we discover, what we wrestle with, right? We're likely to remember. So I'm hoping that we can get a brave group to share at the end, what's going to stick with me. Okay, that's going to be the theme of what I'm going to ask you about. And you can answer in whatever ways you want to take that. What sticks in your heart, what sticks in your craw, like bugs you, right? Or sticks you to a new way of thinking or a new way of acting. Maybe it's a specific parable, maybe it's all 13 that we've studied, and I will have them for you, so I'll hand them out if you need a review. But that's going to be the question I'm going to ask you at the end. So to our topic at hand, today is about Matthew 25. So if you want to turn there, and for our prayer, I always try to make it thematic a little bit in some way. So the passage that we're going to read today is the inspiration for a lot of social workers, which made me think of the mother of social work. That's what she's called, Jane Addams. And maybe I'm the only one who knows a lot about Jane Addams because I grew up in Illinois, and Illinoisans are very proud of their history. So anything about Lincoln, anything about the Emancipation Proclamation. But Jane Addams and Hull House was also a big part of my, junior high history classes. She was also the first female winner of the Nobel Prize. Did you know that? 1931, she was too ill to give a speech. She died about 3 years later. And they, of course, didn't give it to her alone. There was some other person they gave it to also that year. So she was like co-winner of the prize. But she wrote this letter when she was 19 years old, Jane Addams. This is what she says. She had a really interesting upbringing with religion. Her dad was like an evangelical Christian and very uncomfortable with denominations. And she herself was very uncomfortable with like a lot of emotion. So it caused her to wrestle a lot with faith. But her like awakening to like people and what they needed was, I think, very evident early on in her life. So when she was 19, she wrote a letter to her friend Ellen, said this: "Every time I talk about religion, I vow a great vow never to do it again. I find myself growing indignant and sensitive when people speak of it lightly, as if they had no right to. You see, I am so unsettled, as I resettle so often, but my creed is this: ever be sincere and don't fuss." I find that fascinating. Because of her faith tradition, and kind of her own like ambivalence toward it and toward the way other people used it, she would not, when she gave speeches, necessarily appeal to a particular proof text in scripture for why she did what she did. Although she did cite Jesus and the teachings of Jesus a lot, she did not necessarily say this is my life's work, this is my direction. But she did identify as a Presbyterian. So I grabbed a Presbyterian prayer, and that's what we're going to pray. This is from a resource that they call, Presbyterians call Call to Worship, and it's a prayer of confession. Let us pray. Why are you so extravagant, O God? We work hard, use our intelligence, keep our ledgers balanced, accomplish feats daily, care for our families, and honor our inherited legacies. Is this not enough to earn our place among the favored? Yet you throw open windows and doors, revealing a vision we do not possess, where accomplishments don't count, where tears reap joy, where peace is found in suffering, where confidence is gained by giving away what is ours to treasure. Show us again what matters. Forgive our misplaced values and draw us into your extravagance, that we too might be generous with our love. So that's kind of the direction we're going to go today. We'll need a reader. This is one parable, verses 31 to 46. So it's about 15 verses. And so I'm wondering if someone is going to read this. If you noticed last time too, I want to say this before we read. Last couple times we've read across Gospels and sort of compared and contrasted them. We will not be doing that today because that's, and I don't want to endlessly introduce it, but just know this is the only focus of our time today. So as we read, I want you to be aware of that. We're going to kind of drill down on this one. Matthew 25, 31 to 46. Who would like to share it?
I can read it.
Okay, thank you.
When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom, prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king will reply, "I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison and you did not look after me." They also will answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you?" He will reply, "I tell you the truth, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me." Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life.
Well, bracing for 7:05 a.m. or whatever time it is. Thank you very much. So the heading of this parable, what you got?
Judgment of the nations.
Judgment of the nations.
The final judgment.
The final judgment. Does anybody have parable of the sheep and the goats?
I just say the sheep and the goats.
The sheep and the goats, they removed parable. There is controversy about whether or not this is a parable. For some Bibles, it's not going to call it a parable at all. It's going to call it last judgment or apocalypse or something. So the setting of this parable is much like the setting last week. So you have to go way back to chapter 24 to find it. About verse 3. Where are they? And what is Jesus doing?
Mount of Olives.
There it's Mount of Olives. And in verse 4, right, the disciples ask him, or I guess it's right before verse 4. Verse 4 is when he starts talking. Tell us, when will this be, and what will be the sign, right? Teaching at the Mount of Olives. East of Jerusalem's Temple Mount, right? We learned that last week. This is the place where the glory of God departed from in Ezekiel, and it's where the Messiah was expected to reappear. So there's a bunch of symbolism. And as you skim through 24 and 25, you're going to see a bunch of things. You're going to see a bunch of teaching that's apocalyptic, and you're going to see a few parables like the fig tree. You'll see some stuff about bridesmaids, the faithful and unfaithful slave, right? The parable of the talents, okay, which is right before this one. So there's teaching, parable, teaching, however you want to classify it. There's a lot going on here till we get to 25, 31, and it's sort of all one big block. So what is the surprise or the shock or the scandal in this story, this particular story? And you may have more than one. There might be multiple ones. What do you think?
You don't have any problem figuring it out.
Okay.
God is in the little guy.
I like that. That is definitely shocking, surprising, and we're going to talk about that quite a bit today. This like theological claim that is being made here. So these are the last words of Jesus' last discourse in Matthew. This, it's like part 6 of 6 parts, if there are 6 parts. And like I said, it's after these paragraphs of warning about responsible living and being ready for the Son of Man, and all this stuff goes through 24 and through 25. And when Carrie was reading, you probably kind of noticed this or maybe sense this from the language, that this is like a summary or a pinnacle or the place where everything coheres. It kind of does feel like a summary statement of Jesus. And this is the final story of Jesus' public teaching ministry. Question or comment?
Fits with the Old Testament reading for this coming Sunday.
Yes, it
Isaiah
does.
58. Remarkably,
Say more about what you mean.
well, in Isaiah 58, the people are asking, we're doing the right things as far as worship and stuff. They lay out they're obeying the rules, all that kind of stuff. And we're not getting the blessings. We're not getting what we deserve. And Isaiah, speaking for the Lord, says, your heart's not in it. You're not doing justly. You're not treating those who are the least among you the way you should. It's not what you do in the temple. It's or the stuff that you do to make you feel good, fasting or whatever. It's what you do for those who are in need.
So God being in the little guy or on the side of the little guy is not a new tenet.
Yeah,
It's just got to be repeated so much,
yeah.
right? In like probably every way imaginable. So this particular story of the sheep and the goats and how this judgment will be, does not appear in other gospels. Okay, this is unique to Matthew's gospel. And one scholar I was reading says, really, it's this and the Beatitudes in Matthew that are like important. Like, I mean, there's lots of importance, but Matthew's like, there's like sermons or discourses in Matthew, about 5 of them. And this is one of them. And it's equally important, kind of this whole section, but especially this like pinnacle statement. Because Matthew's expertise is in these like dramatic high points. So people who analyze like how biblical story fits together and sort of chart it in like if you like to analyze literature, there's like 2 halves of Matthew. You can split it into 2 halves of Matthew's gospel, and the pinnacle ending of the first half of Matthew's gospel is Peter's confession in chapter 16. Everything kind of leads up to Peter saying, "You are the Christ." Then the second half of Matthew's gospel, the pinnacle of it is the Great Commission in chapter 28. You go out and be disciples. Okay, so this is how one scholar kind of structures it. But like I said, preceding this, there are 3 parables of judgment and how to be alert for Jesus' return. Each one is kind of metaphorical. There was food that needs to be in season, there's oil in lamps, and there's investing of talents, right? But here it's not really metaphor. It's very concrete, as was being said. It's how. It's like parable deluxe, or maybe not deluxe, like parable laid out flat completely. So let's look at a few of the verses, quite a few of the verses. Verse 31 is where I want to start. Mine says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, okay, all angels will be. And then it says, verse 32, I guess it is. Does yours say all people? All nations?
Yeah.
All something? Okay,
Mhm.
yep. Ethnic, all people, all Gentiles, not only Christians, not only Gentiles, all people. And the Son of Man comes to do what?
Separate them out.
Yeah, judge. And how will he do it? Verse 32, like a
Just as a shepherd does.
like a shepherd. Okay, the word glory is used twice in the same sentence, which means it's emphatic, right? This is not, Jesus comes in obscurity like poor Palestinian parents, right, in this backward village, but he does not return that way. There is glory, and the word his is used a lot, at least in my version of scripture. There are a lot of pronouns here, first person pronouns, and that too is a trait of Matthew's gospel. In these discourses, especially, that those first person pronouns are like really heaped up. His, my, it's really personal. And how many angels will be there?
All of them.
All of them. The whole heavenly world is present. All the nations, right? All people. No special group gets to skip class because they got their homework done. And they will be what? Mine says gathered. What does yours say?
Yeah.
Gathered. So this again should point us toward the Messiah, right? We hear in Old Testament that one of the signs of the coming is a scattered flock that's gathered together. Ezekiel talks about it. Isaiah talks about it. Jeremiah talks about it. And sheep and goat get put in different enclosures at night. So this, they might mingle during the day, but at night they're separated. So this is not unusual. The great divorce, so to speak, the separation. By the way, Pastor Dick, did you know C.S. Lewis's book, he gave it a different title and his publisher changed it? I read that too yesterday. I get off in ditches, you guys. I could tell you anything about Jane Addams you want to know. But the other thing I learned was about the great divorce, the separation. That was the publisher's title. C.S. Lewis's title was much nicer. What was it? Who Goes Home? And they made it. Anyway, so going to the right versus the left is preferred. This is Semitic custom then and still to this day. In fact, I have Muslim friends that there are certain things they will not do with their left hand, like it is considered like evil. So know that. And then by verse about 31, we start to see future tenses of verbs. Okay. And do you note all the titles that are being used for God? We had Son of Man. In verse 34, we get Father. There's Lord that comes a little bit later. Do you see all that?
Yeah.
King, yes, King. Not capitalized in my Bible, but I'm glad it jumps out at you because yes, that too is messianic.
It's capitalized in mine.
It is?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Capitalized.
Mine is
Yeah.
not. See, isn't that cool? Bibles, yeah. So, but that it is a title, definitely. 34, I think it comes up again in 40. The only real messianic title that's missing is Son of David. And one scholar speculates that's because this is all nations. So it is not tribal or territorial, which I found that interesting. And the verb in 34 is come. Okay, duete. It's the same word that's used in Revelation 22 for that judgment scene or that end of the world scene. And you notice the word my, at least mine's translated as my, you that are blessed by my Father. So it's so specific, so personal. And then there are 6 things starting in verse 35 for why the judgment is occurring the way it is. What are the things?
Hungry, thirsty, stranger,
Mm-hmm.
naked,
Yep,
sick, imprisoned.
there it is. And the equivalent actions to assist in those things. Are those hardships to perform?
Well, certainly visiting in prison seems like a tough one. Never done that. Well, maybe once. You could.
And they don't make it easy to do.
No.
And emotionally, it's difficult, even if it's not physically difficult, right? There's such a separation for security now. Would not have necessarily been quite the same, but I do think there are risks, even, in this time to visiting a prisoner. But how about food? How about sick? How about, I mean, are those things hard?
Sick is sometimes hard, especially if it's terminal. Knowing what to say, and
Yeah.
that is a really hard one for me. You know, it's not like you can say, oh, so what are your plans for next week? Because you don't know.
Yeah,
You
there's no
know, and
chit
it's
chat
like-
and small talk.
No,
All of it
it's-
gets taken away in a situation like that.
And that's really hard. And that's where I get coked out.
Yeah, that's where you,
Yeah.
as my kids would say, dip.
Yeah.
Feeding isn't so hard because you just give money. Clothing is the same way. You just give away your old clothes.
Mm,
So it's kind of easy.
mm,
You don't have to think about it. I mean, not really.
yeah.
But is it your old clothes?
What?
But is it the old clothes that we're supposed to give away?
For me, it is.
So what you're saying is, you know, is it how much sacrifice are you willing to,
That's what.
right? So, well, let me put it a different way. It might be emotionally hard, it might be inconvenient, but I mean, is a human able to perform these things?
Sure.
Yes. So early church fathers loved this passage, and Chrysostom was one of them. Wrote a sermon. He noted how basic these instructions are. It doesn't say I was sick and you healed me, or I was in prison and you liberated me, right? Which I found really interesting. You know, what's expected of humans, the ethic we are to live by is little, not big miracles. And this hierarchy of needs, it precedes Maslow and all of his psychological pyramid, right? Food, shelter, self-determination, or sense of security or meaning, all that stuff. And they're all service to people. You probably noticed that too, right? And to the living people. So why don't we elevate basic unflashy ministries and keep getting stuck in society on whoever is a great speaker or healer or miracle worker? If we have this so clearly here, it's pretty unambiguous.
What I find interesting in this section is there's no judgment on those people that are in those conditions. And the church today generally, I feel, has great judgment on every one of those conditions.
So what is missing is there's no fault finding in the person who doesn't have work.
Because there's always
Food.
fault finding and why are they in that position, or, you know, especially in prison, obviously, but there's no mention of that you're in prison for the right or the wrong, you know,
Correct.
it would be that somebody murdered somebody and
Correct.
there's no differentiating. But even hungry, there's just such.
There's no blame.
Yeah, there's such great judgment. There's such pious help, but I don't know what the words are, but
Yeah.
you know, like, in general, it's like, oh, you're so great for doing these, I'm so great for
Right.
doing these things for you lonely person, you know, it's kind of
Yes.
that attitude.
It never is their interest in dissolving the social class or the thing that got you there. It's just, right, I will be secure in who I am, but I will deign to
Yeah.
support you if I have time. If I don't have tickets to the Super Bowl, etc. Right? It's true. I think you're right. So, yeah, go ahead.
That word prison, I'm wondering if it's a wider picture, like nursing home, for example.
Mhm.
Or somebody who's homebound. And I think of the folks who deliver Meals on Wheels, for example, they're doing that to those who are kind of in prison. Yeah. So, yeah, it's not just bars.
I like that. And I think for all 6 of these, we should think about a little broader category, right? It's concrete, but it's also those who are, like I said, don't have the right of self-determination would be a great way to think about those in prison. Metaphorically in that way. Okay, so, then 37 through 39, I want to make sure we get time to discuss at the end too, so, I want to move us through. And you is used so much in this, this part too. When was it that we saw you, right? Blah, 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 and the king answers. So notice that it does not depend, one's, gathering at the judgment does not depend, or gathering on the right side, does not depend on you being conscious or aware of what you're doing. Do you see that? What do you think of that idea?
You mean that I know I'm gonna be on the right because I'm doing these things?
Like, when did we see you do this? And he says, truly I tell you, amen, right? Is the word. It's like, listen up. Just as you did it to one of the least of these, you did it to me. So their salvation doesn't even depend on them knowing they're doing the right thing. Which is kind of the opposite of Isaiah 58, right? Like that whole tendency to tell us what we need to do so we can check it off the list. This is like an ethic that's much wider than that and really can't be contained to performance, right? It's more like identity or nature or, right? Do you notice that? What do you think of that idea? I mean, we talk about people are ignorant of their sins, right? And not understanding where they made a mistake, right? And hopefully we hopefully give the same benefit of the doubt to others that we give to ourselves. We say, well, I didn't know it too, right? So if we know we can be ignorant and do poorly, what do you think of this idea of being ignorant but doing the right thing? Would you say some of the people you know that are the best at this don't think they're doing anything at all? I would. Doesn't it seem to be the way it goes? I find this fascinating. Pascal, the elect will be ignorant of their virtues and the outcast of the greatness of their sins. Okay. Verse 40. Truly, I tell you, yes. What you do to one of the least of these members of my family, mine says, you did it to me. This one sentence has been far more important for the care of the poor than have whole systems of philosophy, says a Bible scholar named Klug Heizenrelgen. But I like his sentence. I had to like type his name letter by letter. Of these, my brothers, sisters, siblings, do you have other translations in that? Brothers,
These brothers of mine.
mine is members of my family, which I like because the word there is got a word that's singagate, which means like brought into the family circle or like took me into your family. You did it to me. And like I said, this is such a formative part of church theology, early church theology. Tertullian, you saw a brother, you saw the Lord. He wrote. Clement of Alexandria, when you have seen your brother, you have seen God. Okay. Verse 41. This is where it gets kind of like those at his left hand, right? Cursed. You that are accursed, mine says, or cursed. Past participle. You were warned. And there's no equivalent to being blessed by my Father. Do you see that? It doesn't say cursed by my Father. Some commenters say that's important too.
This one says under God's curse.
Under God's curse. That's a little extra. I mean, extra interpretive stuff. And then those that say at his left hand, you that are accursed. I'd have to look up the verse, but I don't think God's name appears there. Because some commenters would say the curse didn't really come from God. Like you did that to yourself. Right? By your actions. Yeah. Do you have something you want to say? Oh, I thought you were yawning.
I-
Sorry.
I was drowning, but I do have, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think that when it says into the eternal fire prepared for the devil, do you think that's why some people have trouble with being cremated?
No, but I do think there's a natural tendency for people to not like that idea. I actually think I don't think it's always like one-to-one that's evil. I think it's sometimes like that's scary. Do you know what I mean? And that's the personification of scary. Because, you know, we have this visceral reaction when a fire breaks out, right? That it's
Right.
bad, wrong, terrible, must be put out, destructive, etc. I mean, I can't say for everyone, maybe. In fact, I just answered this question for somebody this week who's doing pre-planning. So I looked up the ELCA's document on organ donation and cremation. And I assured this family, and if you want this document, I can give it to you. Any like respectful way you would want to take care of your body and or give parts of that body, right, in a respectful way to anyone else is absolutely okay. So if you've been worried about that, and this used to come up a lot more than it does now. 20 years ago, this was a big thing. People, now I would say probably 75% of the burials we do are cremation. And that has flipped immensely in the last 5 years. So I would say before that was like 60-40 casket, at least maybe 70-30. And then the last 5 years, it's the exact opposite. People are choosing cremation. Yeah. But it's a good point, you know, because it's scary. And do you notice we don't get a lot of like detail. It's approached pretty sensitively by Jesus, but there are things missing, right? It doesn't really get fleshed out totally. Perhaps because it's not Jesus' concern, right? It's for us to be aware of, like offense, like a choice, like actions have consequences, but it's not like detailed out, right? Because Jesus' concern is not that. It's that exists. Here's what you do to be on the right. I don't know. And then I also want to notice what's missing here too. I don't see adultery or murder that Jesus is condemned. It's the little things that don't get done. Do you think that's significant?
You mentioned the biggies, you know, that we spend so much time on as big sins, you know.
And expanded these categories in such interesting ways. So if you're withholding food for your neighbors so that they're starving, I mean, it's not actively murdering them, but it's certainly widening the passive indifference. Right?
Like when you talk about, I find this fascinating that here's people that store for the future, you know, future apocalypse kind of stuff. I think it's, the whole world is starving outside and you're gonna be eating and that's okay. You know,
Exactly. I got mine.
I always think that's a fascinating subject to get into.
Yes.
How could you let your neighbor starve and you and your little family are okay?
To examine that whole idea. Isn't that interesting?
I always think that's fascinating.
Makes me think about, I probably shared this with you, but I've made such an impression on me. I wasn't supposed to watch it when I was 10 years old. Do you guys remember the movie The Day After? It was about the end of the world. George C. Scott starred, and it was TV movie. Do you remember this one? It was about nuclear disaster. My mom's like, don't watch it. So then I'm standing looking at it. Cracking living room, I was supposed to be in bed. And at the end of that movie, he has an orange that someone has shared with him because he knows he's gonna die of radiation and he doesn't want to hide anymore. So he just takes the orange and eats the orange, and then they pan out, and that's the end of the movie. It's so profound. But really, it's that whole idea of like, what is the prepping for?
And then isn't there,
Because then you have to defend it, right? And so,
isn't there a televangelist that's selling that stuff?
of course,
I think there is one that Jim.
I think it's Jim Baker's
Jim
son,
Baker.
dad,
Yeah.
Jim Baker, no,
Jim Baker, some.
Who's the
Jim
son?
Baker. I don't
who's
know,
the son? Jay.
but they're
I've met
selling them-
Jay.
They're selling that kind of stuff.
Jay's an very interesting guy, and his dad is out of prison and remarried, and yes, I believe that is how he makes his living. Well, yes,
Do you remember the book Anne Rand's Atlas Shrugged?
I never read it.
That's kind of the same thing. That the intellectuals, the smart people of the world, had this determined a place that they could stay in.
Hmm.
Say, everybody else was out, but they were gonna be good.
But we kind of do versions of,
Yeah,
lighter
we do
versions
it.
of it now.
Yes, we do. And this story is harsh too, right? So is the failure of service so evil that it deserves eternal punishment?
Well,
I mean, Matthew's Jesus seems to think so, right?
yeah,
It's the failures, and I mean, the elevation of selfishness.
Or maybe to put it that way.
if I remember right, I remember it as you did not feed me, you did not give me a drink. This one here says you would not feed me, you refused to help. Which makes it that much stronger. It was like
Yeah.
a deliberate refusal. You refuse to help.
I think that's a faithful translation.
Well, and we're supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves. And if we're loving our neighbor as ourselves, we should be taking care of this stuff as part of loving our neighbor. So then we're going against what we're supposed to be doing.
All the time.
Yes.
All the time.
And that was an article I read, that the theme was love.
Yeah.
Love for humanity or for your neighbor.
Pretty radical love. Are human beings that responsible for each other? Matthew's Jesus seems to say so. Right?
It's easier to love at a distance.
Absolutely. I love in theory, a little harder in particular. Yes.
When I was working with sexual violence victim survivors, that I had a training class, and so all the other people that were working with me, and most of them were in late 20s, early 30s kind of age, and I was the old one. But they had a list of oppressive groups, and Christians were one of the oppressive groups they put up. I thought it sobered me. I was like, oh, jeez. We just see it so differently when you're in our circle, like compared to theirs, and that they would say the worst person for a sexual violence victim survivor to talk to would be a Christian. I just think that's so sad. We have missed the mark that much. And
That we have to come with a warning,
yeah, that we may be an oppressive group. I mean, that we're
not a safe person.
that we're not looked on well
Right.
by the world.
So maybe
And
we
none
have
of
to,
those people were Christians, I was
Yeah.
one of the few in the room, and I just found that fascinating
Yeah.
and very sad.
so it's such a fine line, because again, those who are safest don't usually shout it from the rooftops. Right? They're just quietly going about it.
I have stuck on my computer a post-it, that's a quote from Michelle Obama in a speech. And I'm not gonna get it just right, but the essence is, we should not define success by the money we make, but the lives of people that we affect.
Thank you.
Which is another trap. We're working so hard to get ahead and to make money, and that drive is big,
Yeah.
and all this other stuff falls by the wayside.
And I would say too, I mean, there can be a trap on the effect or influence side too. There are people who stop treating people as people, right? So I think there's a danger, or there's the possibility of ego in either one of those things. But I mean, I would definitely agree with her in the investment category that, money is a tool, to get things done that we want to get done, but human resources are far more valuable in my opinion. So the wealth of a community is its people, it's not, it's capital. It's human capital, which we're in a really interesting time when we start talking about that now, because the generations behind many of you is my generation, which is smaller. And so there's some real issues about that when it comes to like the workplace and so forth. And how we're trying to get the same amount of work done with the smaller pool of people. So everybody's job description is expanded by 30%. They're crushed by it. And there's not a lot of understanding about how that is the case. So, I mean, there's lots we could think about that way too, just about humans and how valuable they are.
So on TV, this is a judgmental thing on my part. But on TV, there are these ads with the sad music and these poor abused dogs. And we're so worried about these dogs, and I have to wonder, do we worry about people?
No,
In the same way?
I agree. In the 80s, Sally Struthers was out there with the child though in Africa. Remember that? Oh, that used to drive me crazy.
Jennifer Garner is out there now, with Save the Children kind of thing, but
But you're right. I think
What-
we have a lot of sympathy for abusive animals, much less sympathy for abusive women and
this
children.
work is really hard. I mean, to be somebody who really gives to the poor in this way and to visit prisons like we were, this is not easy work. It is really, really difficult. And I mean, after time, like you do that for 2 years, you are burnt,
Mhm.
and you have to suspend your judgment every
Yes.
minute of the day, It's really, really tiring. If more of us did it, maybe it would be an easier load, I don't know, but it's,
They aren't
that's-
all Mother Teresa.
Yeah.
There's
Well-
there's a guilt after you've done it and you stop doing it for a while. It's really hard.
And I would say, maybe this is just me, but one of the things that I attach a consumer mentality to that too, consumerist mentality of, then I have to do it all. And I'm not sure that's what God, you used the word little right away at the beginning. I'm thinking, yeah,
Yeah.
like, again, I'm not sure that little is, I mean, the bar is lower, I think, than we sometimes set it. What do you guys, we overcomplicate this, we paralyze ourselves, and so then we stop. Like, I can't fix it all, so I'm done with this. Well, that's not what this is saying.
There's a statement in the footnote in mine, and it says, at the same time, those who believe in Jesus need to guard against the temptation to make serving others a means to achieve salvation.
People still get to be people, not objects, right? I agree.
And you don't see a lot of change sometimes.
You don't.
And which is hard. And then is it enough just for me to be my mother's caretaker at the moment?
Yes,
I know that's.
so let me just say it again. Yes, and I know there's others in this room doing it too. Yep.
I know it's true, and it's really hard when you.
It's
that's
really
all I'm
hard.
doing is taking care of her more and more every day. So,
Mhm. And it's not glamorous and it's not fun and you don't get thanked. I mean, there's so much we haven't talked about that I think is really real about investing in people. People don't always want to be invested in. They're not always going to say thank you. That's,
Different value systems.
yeah.
A lot of this depends on a value system. This is talking about people with more values than a lot of people have. And the people that have low values have it for a reason, because their parents maybe didn't have any money. Parents couldn't provide for the basic necessities. Everywhere you went, schools, you were behind. Church, you were looked as like a project for somebody to accomplish and to take advantage of you. So when you're born with a value system that's low, you don't think you can achieve anything that's related to the Bible. Surviving with brothers and sisters is difficult because there's not enough food. If you go to sports, you forgave the food would be gone when you got home. I'm talking about myself. You know,
Right.
And
Right.
so I resorted to taking apples off people's trees and asparagus that was growing wild and stuff like that.
Yep.
And when I got donated to the priest, I didn't know he was a sexual predator until it makes it different. And, I tried to work for change to a system in schools of teaching value systems during social studies. And of course, that caused the teachers to do too much work, so it only lasted for about a year.
Yeah. Like, it would be better if you would just stick to the facts and dates rather than asking the questions of why things are the way they are. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I would say not low value system, but survival, right? There's not a lot of room for polite when you're trying to survive. That's not your first concern. So yes, people come at things with lots of, and I think you described it very well, what it feels like to be somebody's project,
And
right? Which is really
Yeah.
objectifying to someone.
I had two sisters that were pregnant by the time they were 15 and gone. Everybody left.
Mhm.
I went in the army.
That was your ticket.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, there's a meatpacking strike going on, and Hornell's was the only place hiring, but there's 500 people in line in front of you,
Yeah,
so you didn't stand a chance.
Yeah.
Then I was overweight, so I couldn't get in the service until I lost weight.
Oh.
And I couldn't go to the doctor, so my mom snuck me to the doctor.
oh,
Couldn't go to the dentist,
yeah,
dad drank.
Yeah.
So eventually, I disobeyed the doctor. I took 2 thyroid pills instead of 1 and lost the weight, and then I suffered from that in the service too for a while.
doing what it took. Thank you, Denny.
A lot of the people that we're talking about in the Bible sense of time, they had to be lower class.
This is much closer to what you're describing. I think that everyday humans have in their life, right? We're so privileged, and it's hard for us to even step out of our privilege to understand that. Thank you. All right, this is profound. I know we're gonna keep talking about it. I know it's gonna come up in other areas. Does anyone have any final thoughts about this parable that is beyond a parable? I do want to talk about parables in general too before we end, so. All right. So I'm gonna hand out, do you remember I handed you a yellow piece of paper, but then I took notes and I used it. So all I did is photocopy, and you'll see on my chicken scratch, but anything that's noted are parables that we studied. So take one and pass it around. The dates get off because we had a snow day on the 21st of December that I wasn't counting on. So we actually ended today, February 1st, instead of the 25th of January. So the dates are a little off at the end, but the parables themselves are there. So, what we did together, there were 13 parables, but I think we voted in September and started September 28th. It took us a while because we had a Thanksgiving break, and I think we took the week of MEA, which was like Lutefisk dinner off. And then we had a couple weeks at Christmas. So my question for you was, what's going to stick with you of these studies? And like I said, you can answer that in any way the question takes you, right? About one parable, about all of them, something specific, something that you are going to continue to think about. And then I have like a little ending reflection too, but I want to hear from all of you. Just take a minute and take a look. Sorry, people online, you're not gonna be able to do that part, but I'm sure you remember some of the parables that we studied, but this helps you go way back to September, October too. And remember what we talked about. What do you think of Jesus teaching in parables? What have you gained? What's sticking?
the concepts were really quite hard, more of them than I remembered, because I think, in the past, when I've heard teachings on them, they've taken one thing out of it and left the rest alone.
Flatten it
Yeah.
to this
And so,
one moral.
You just got one moral out of it.
Yep.
And I've found that, we get some explanation in the Bible, the people actually hearing the parables would not have gotten.
Mhm.
So but they're used to that, maybe the cultural was used to that kind of speaking.
Yes, the rabbinic mashal or the riddle, right? And kind of being left with it.
And we think we're so smart.
Yeah,
you
right.
know, But they had to figure that out on their own, and I found that kind of difficult.
Yeah.
That kind of shocked me a little bit.
Yeah.
Especially like the workers and the landowners, though that series kind of got me a little, like that was a way of looking at God as I hadn't thought of it before.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So it opened up different visions too of even what God's role is in some of these stories and facets of God that maybe don't feel very familiar or accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotcha. Me too. Did others of you find the parables frustrating or difficult or I find the best word I can describe when I think about parables for me is like they're slippery. So when they come up again, I'm like, oh, I gotta read that again. I gotta read that again. I gotta read it again. Does it really mean that? I better read it again. Like it doesn't stick in my mind. Is that true for you?
Well, they've been very long lasting, the way they're put in the Bible. The Bible's been around for a long time. It provides a lot of discussion to come to the understanding that perhaps he wanted. So it was probably the very best way to do it. They didn't have tape recorders to record anything, pass it on. So the Bible and everybody who participating in making this out and making it out.
Yeah.
It keeps it more current.
So the
Not very.
slipperiness or the stickiness or the inscrutability of a parable, let's say, it's a big word, is also key to its enduring. Because once you have something figured out, you put it in a box and you set it on the shelf and you go past it, right? And you go, oh, I already know all that. But you can't really do that with parables, can you?
I think that one of the things that I most appreciate about at least some of the parables is after the parable, when the disciples said, Lord, what are you talking about? Yeah.
Yeah. And
That's
sometimes we get an explanation and a lot of times we don't.
right. Yeah.
He tells them another parable instead. Oh, he's so irksome that way.
And some of these are upended. I mean, it's not the way I would think.
Yes. So you caught and will keep with you the surprise pieces of that, where the story is maybe even the exact opposite of what is
That seems
traditional.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That seems rational. And some of these just seem so, in a way,
Yeah.
irrational.
Right.
The prodigal son.
Hmm.
Did the son who had stayed, did he go greet his
Right.
father?
That cliffhanger. You're on that cliffhanger. Somebody should write, Lin-Manuel Miranda should write a Broadway play about the elder brother. I'm going to tweet that to him. Because that is, it's much like when, like I think about Wicked and the Wicked Witch and you get her origin story. I've never heard a good story on the older brother, really. We need one.
This is part of the teaching method.
Yeah.
And it seems to be timeless. And Yeah, I think how long ago this was, and look
Yeah.
at the discussion.
And the teaching method, to go back to what Denny was saying, when you tried to use this in school, what you heard was it's too hard, right? We'd rather do it the conventional way. I mean, there's a resistance to all, I think parables are subversive. They're not meant to fit.
I think that's the problem that we have with, we want it to be black and white.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just
Tie up
like,
with a bow at the
yeah,
end.
I wouldn't
it's,
remember
it's just
saying
like the
that.
book, the wolf side of the Three Little Pigs.
Yes,
Nobody wants to read the wolf side of
Right.
the story. And he was only going to borrow a cup of sugar. I have the book.
it's really, so
Yes.
to use, and this is another thing you said it's, nobody wants to hear it. We don't, and I would say, maybe I'm generalizing, but God, I wish it were different, because I love this. And I think we've responded really well to this when we start using our biblical imagination. Like, I hope you know that is okay to wonder about and think about, and but generations past were worried about heresy, or the text doesn't say that, and really the text is like, this translation of the text that I read doesn't say that. We're so worried about like doctrinal purity that we never actually engage with it. And parables, I think, force us to engage emotionally, also intellectually, but really your intellect can't save you here. There's practical knowledge, there's pieces to this that you will never tie up in a bow. So it confounds the wise. I mean, it's really scriptural in that way, confounding the wise. Other thoughts? I mean, it can be about a specific parable, or yeah, go ahead. I know, it does. And that's what I that's part of the reason I love being part of Bible study with all of you, is like, it only takes our attention for a short while before, and asking the right questions, or setting the right stage, or being together to realize that. I hope.
So are we all going to hell?
Well, you mean thinking specifically about this parable today? So Jesus spends like what? It's a 15, let's just put it in order. It's a 15 sentence parable story. Like 2 of them are on hell. Jesus isn't as concerned about it as we are, I don't think.
Well, with good reason.
But I mean, and the reason I say that is because like the book of Colossians, the book of Ephesians envisions like the end times being like a great unification. But here there's a fork in the road. Jesus is clear about that. I mean, we may not like it, but it is there. So even the Bible doesn't always cohere on those ultimate questions. I personally, I mean, I hear that from people, like they're truly worried about their salvation. And I think the key out of that is to be less worried about oneself. So it is also parabolic in the sense of it's confounding. If you're so worried about yourself, like the key, Jesus is telling you the way out of it is to get over yourself. Literally, get over yourself. And that's the one thing we don't want to do. We really like to think about ourselves and wonder about ourselves and stress about ourselves. And, so yes, and that I think is, at least that's what I catch from this parable. So I don't want you to not be, I mean, I feel like consequences to actions are real. We see them in life. I'm certainly not going to say Jesus didn't mean that, right? I'm not one who discounts parts of scripture. I mean, I think we gotta look carefully at it. But at the same time, I want to make sure we emphasize the things that I think Jesus was emphasizing, which was much more about the positive action instead of avoiding the negative action. I mean, always, every time. Beatitudes are the same way. There are curses in Beatitudes too, but mostly it was about blessing people who did not feel God's blessing. Like, if we miss that and only focus on the part for us, or what we feel might be for us, or like use it as I just don't think Jesus is that much of a stick guy. I think he's more of a carrot guy. Do you know? I pray so. And then, of course, we're not even talking about the meaning of Jesus' death and resurrection, right? And how that plays into salvation, which is, we know we cannot save ourselves. So this idea of being caught up in like, are we going to be in hell? I don't know. How much do you trust Jesus to be good? I guess. That's kind of the rub, because none of us will do this perfectly. This is what we are called to do and be about. But we are not Jesus.
So as a goat, I would rather identify with the current usage of goat.
Greatest of all time.
That is truly anachronistic to Jesus. He would not know what you are talking about, right? All right, it is past, I know, it is past 8. Do you want to keep any other thoughts and reflections about parables? Okay, I want to read this to you. Roy Goebel, Junkyard Wisdom. He writes a blog, very down to earth. He's not literary writer, which is why I picked his thoughts. I didn't want to end with some philosophical thing. He's just a guy. I think he's a pastor. Here's what he writes. Parables can drive me crazy because they make me think. This became apparent to me for the zillionth time while writing my upcoming Lent devotions. Over and over, Jesus speaks in parables. I don't really want to think. Thinking is hard. Sometimes I want to grab Jesus by the shirt collar and yell, just tell me what you want me to know, damn it. And I'm not the only one. Disciples were often clueless. Same with the Pharisees, legal experts, and everyone else. Look, I'm being a bit flippant here, but everyone talks about what a brilliant teacher Jesus was. Yet it seems like his audience never quite understood what the hell he was talking about, which is sort of the point, isn't it? Because parables make us think. They don't offer a clean and simple bit of instruction like the Proverbs do. They don't wrap truth in the beauty and poetry of a psalm. They certainly don't bore us like a sermon. They tell us a story, often about people Jesus makes up. We are pulled into the narrative because we can't resist a good story, and then it ends in an unexpected way, and we ask, wait, what? I ask what the kingdom of heaven is like, and you start talking about mustard seeds. Parables make me think, but sometimes I don't want to think. I want someone to just give me a checklist of things to do, and I can get on with life. But in my calmer moments, I realize the wisdom in using parables. The story sticks with me even when the meaning is elusive. This leads to wrestling with the story, trying to make sense of it and letting it take root in my soul. Okay, so maybe I don't dislike parables as much as I thought, but they still drive me crazy. I thought that was really sweet. Okay, so next time we are going to start Adam Hamilton, and I tried to check and make sure this thing is going to be shipped to me. I think it's coming tomorrow. Pray it does. Otherwise, next week it'll be potpourri, or I don't know. We'll play Jeopardy or something. So next week, Words of Life is what we ordered on 1/25. Supposed to arrive February 1st or 2nd. Words of Life, Jesus and the Promise of the 10 Commandments today. So there's Adam Hamilton's the fast talking guy, right? Methodist guy. And so he orders the commandments differently. We're just going to live with it and go with it. I'm not going to shoehorn them into our different numbering system. We're going to go with the 10 Commandments as the Methodists do. That'll be 10 weeks. So we'll end like around after Easter, something like that. That's what I know. So I'll find out more. I get the leader guide and like the book at sometime soon, and I'll start structuring it. So next week, 10 Commandments. It will be more of a many times these ones, like, wasn't it 7 words, 7 things Christians shouldn't say or whatever. So it's going to be more topical, kind of taking a break from exegetical like study stuff, which I think is right. It'll be more discussion. Come ready to do that. And then, like I said, I'll have the sign up for the field trip too next week. All right.
I have one comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so it just all of a sudden dinged me here. The title of my thing in this parable was the judgment of the nations. So if we take all of those 6 things and apply it to nations, that's a whole new perspective on what we're supposed to be doing.
Because our leaders will be the goats, not us.
Ah. And here we're back to scapegoats. Okay, got it. So true though, in the sense of, these are,
I mean, immigration,
So we-
helping other nations.
I think it's important as you think about your own like personal morality, to think about public morality, right? So like here at church, I know when I talk with families during baptism, we go through these promises they make to live with, do you promise to bring this child to live with them among God's faithful people, to bring them to the word of God and the Holy Supper, teach them the Lord's Prayer, the Creed, and the 10 Commandments, place in their hands Holy Scriptures and all that stuff that they say. And then literally when we are evaluating our education program, this is the metrics we use. So I don't know if you knew that. I mean, it is that overt. What is the memory work? The Lord's Prayer, the Creed, and the 10 Commandments, right? What do we do? But we have milestones that place in people's hands the Holy Scriptures. So like the church tries to do the things that we say we're going to do ritually, like we make them literally overt. Wouldn't it be interesting to apply this, right? Which I think this is what social agencies do. And then they get told, yes, that's very nice. Thank you for coming to testify. Okay, goodbye, right? And then they go off and draft legislation however they want to draft it. But I mean, I don't think you're wrong,
I just, all of a sudden, it was like, okay. this
because the
is
word is
what we-
ethne, which is nations. Yes. Mhm.
And we're talking about our individual selves, but we should also be including how we're handling it overseas, interstate.
Okay, so 10 Commandments is up next. We can keep talking about it, right? Because that too will be like a question of public morality and personal. All right, thank you, everybody. Yes, thank you. Oh, it was really good for me too. All right, bye, Jan and Diane. Be good.
Yeah.
Feeling like more